Hello, this is Wayne Scott. He's a graduate of DTS. He just graduated with a CDL and passed a vehicle inspection test with a state tester. He volunteered to do and perform the vehicle inspection so you too can ace your test. We will begin this test in the cab of the truck. Okay, we're in the truck now, and the state tester is out front because you start demonstrating all the lights and how they function first. And Wayne is going to start with the lights now.
Alright, I'm going to show the tester my parking lights. I'm going to show him my headlights. I'm going to show him my high beams. I'm going to show him my left turn signal. I'm going to show him my right turn signal. I'm going to show him my four-way flashers. And then the inspector is going to walk to the rear of the vehicle. I will shut the lights off. I'll watch my mirror, and when he gets back there, I'm going to show him my running lights, my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my brake lights. And then I will shut the lights off as he comes to the cab.
Now, as the tester gets in the cab, he will instruct you that you will be performing your vehicle inspection with the 4 air supply system test. You have to be specific in your explanation, and you may begin.
My first test will be an air leak test. I do not want to lose more than 4 psi in 1 minute. To do that, I will depress both brakes, apply the brake, wait for the gauges to settle, and time 1 minute. While I'm timing, I will watch the gauges so I can tell the tester exactly how many psi I lost. And I will begin timing now. Now we're going to assume that a minute has gone by. I'm going to tell the tester exactly how long I timed for. I timed it for 1 minute 5 seconds. I lost 1 psi on my primary and 2 psi on my secondary. My next test will be my low air pressure warning buzzer and light. To do that, I will turn the key on. I will fan down, and the light and buzzer should activate at 60 psi or above. Alright, my low air pressure warning activated at 72 on my primary and 90 on my secondary. My next test will be my tractor protection valve. They should pop out at 20 to 45 psi, and I will continue to fan down. Alright, my tractor protection valve activated at 22 psi on my primary and 58 on my secondary. My next test will be my air governor cutoff. I will start the vehicle, charge the air system, and the air governor should activate at 100 to 125 psi. I'll check my brakes and start the vehicle. We will hear a whoosh when the air governor cuts out at 100 to 125. While we're waiting for the air pressure to build up, we're going to go ahead and continue with the in-cab inspection. My first check will be my mirrors. They're securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. They're clean. They're not cracked or broken. And they're properly adjusted for me. My next check will be my steering wheel play. To do that, I will release my seatbelt. I will step out on the running board, and I should have no more than 2 inches of play or 10 degrees on a 20-inch wheel. I do not have more than 2 inches or 10 degrees on this vehicle. My next check will be my air horn and my city horn. There's my city horn. There's my air horn. The next thing I will check is my windshield. It's securely mounted vehicle. There are no obstructions in my view. It is not cracked, pitted, or broken, and there are no illegal decals or stickers on it, and it is clean. My next check will be my windshield wipers. They're securely mounted to the vehicle. They are not bent or broken. They are not missing any pieces. They are pressed against the windshield and the rubber is intact. My next check will be the operation of my windshield wipers. Here's my low. They operate smoothly. Here's my high. Those also operate smoothly. And here's my washers. They should automatically stop when they're done. Next, I'm going to go to my climate control. Here's my fan. Here's my heater vent. And here's my defroster vent. All are operating properly. Now I'm going to check my pedals. I'm going to check my throttle pedal for freedom of movement, no sticking, no binding, no unusual noises. I'm going to check my brake pedal for freedom of movement, no sticking, no binding, no unusual noises. I'm going to check my clutch pedal for freedom of movement, no sticking, no binding, no unusual noises. Then I'm going to take a look at my instruments. I'm going to make sure that they are securely mounted to the vehicle. They are not cracked or broken. They are operating properly. My oil pressure is 45 psi. My voltmeter is reading 14 volts. My water temperature is 175. My tachometer is properly working. My air pressure is at 80 psi on my primary and 80 psi on my secondary. Now when the air governor cuts out at 100 to 125, we will hear a whoosh. Alright, the air governor just cut out at 123 on the primary and 127 on the secondary.
Okay, at this point the tester will tell you to go ahead and test your brakes.
My first brake check will be my trailer brakes. I will depress my tractor brake. I will pull against it gently in low gear. My next check will be my tractor brake. And my final check will be my service brake. I will roll forward a little bit and then gently apply the brake. All brakes appear to be operating properly.
Have you checked everything? Are you concluded your test?
Yes, sir.
Then you may go ahead and shut it off. Now with the in-cab complete, you will meet the tester out in front of the truck with your hammer / flashlight.
Alright, while I'm in front of the vehicle, I'm going to check for any puddles under the vehicle which would indicate a leak. I'm also going to look for any leaning which would indicate a suspension problem. I'm going to check all my lights, make sure my 5 amber lights in the front are not cracked, broken, missing any pieces, and they're clean. I'm going to check my headlights to make sure they're securely mounted to the vehicle, they're not cracked or broken. I'm also going to make note that all lights and reflectors that face the front and sides of the vehicle are amber, and all lights and reflectors that face the rear are red. I'm going to set my hammer down, pop my hood. I'm going to start my underhood inspection with a Z pattern. I'm going to start with my windshield washer reservoir. I'm going to make note that it is securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. It's at the proper level. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking, and the cap is on and secure. I'm going to come to my radiator reservoir. It is securely mounted to the vehicle. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. It is at proper level by these 2 sight glasses, and the lid is in place and secure. I'm going to check my fan belt to make sure it's not cracked, worn, excessively worn, or frayed, and there's no more than 1/2 to 3/4 inch of free play from center. Next, I'm going to check my spring hanger. It's securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. It is not cracked, dented, or broken. I'm going to check, make sure my bushing is in place. It is securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. It is not frayed, worn, or missing. I'm going to check my leaf springs. I'm going to make sure there are no cracked, bent, broken, or missing or shifted leaf springs. They are securely mounted to the vehicle at both ends, no missing nuts or bolts. I'm going to check my U-bolts. They're securely mounted in the vehicle. They're not bent, cracked, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts, and they're securely mounted in the vehicle. Next, I'm going to go to my shock, which is right here. It's securely mounted in the vehicle at both ends. No missing nuts or bolts, and it is not cracked, dented, or leaking any fluid. Next, I'm going to check this airline. I'm going to make sure that it is securely connected at both ends. It is not cracked, worn, frayed, rubbing, or leaking any air. Next is my brake canister. I'm going to make sure that it is securely connected to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts, and it is not cracked, dented, or leaking any air. Next, we're going to check our slack adjusters. I'm going to make sure that all pins are in place, all cotter keys are in place, no missing nuts or bolts. It's properly lubricated, and if I pull on this, I should get no more than 1 inch of free play, and when they're applied, they should be at 90 degrees or less. Next, I'm going to come down to my brake drum. I'm going to make sure my brake drum is not cracked, dented, or broken, no excessive grooves, no holes, and there is no evidence of oil or grease. My brake linings. First, I want to make sure they're at least 1/4 inch thick. They're securely mounted in the vehicle, no missing springs, nuts, or bolts. They're not cracked, broken, or missing any pieces, and there is no evidence of oil or grease. Next, I'm going to come to my tire. I'm looking for even tread wear, 4/32 of groove, or 4/32 of tread in every major groove. I'm going to check the sidewall. I'm going to make sure there are no abrasions, bumps, or cuts, and no exposed cord. Next, I'm going to check my flange and rim. I'm going to check my flange for any dents or cracks. I'm going to check my rim for any cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check all my lug nuts to make sure there are no loose, broken, missing, or distorted lug nuts. I'm also looking for rust trails, which would indicate a loose lug nut, or I'm also looking for shiny threads, which would also indicate a loose lug nut. Behind this BD cap, there is an oil hub seal. I want to make sure that it is not dented, cracked, or broken, no missing nuts or bolts, it's securely mounted in the vehicle, and it is not leaking around the bolts or the seal. To check that, I can use the sight glass itself, or I can pop the rubber grommet out and put my finger in it and add oil if needed. And we also want to strike the tire to make sure that it is properly inflated. Alright, we're on the other side of the engine compartment. We're going to start with our power steering reservoir. It's securely mounted in the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. It's at the proper level. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. The cap is secured and in place. Also, if I could not see that the level was up, there's a dipstick on the cap. We're going to come to our oil fill port. It is securely mounted to the vehicle. There are no missing nuts or bolts. It is not cracked, dented, or leaking. This is our air compressor. We're going to make sure it's securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. It's not cracked, dented, or leaking any fluids or air. This is our dipstick. This is where we check the oil. This is where we would put it in if it needed it. Now we're going to come to our steering box. This is my steering box. I want to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. It's not cracked, dented, or leaking. Next, we're going to come to all our steering linkages. Securely mounted to the vehicle at both ends, properly lubricated. The rest of our steering linkages are securely mounted to the vehicle, not cracked, bent, or broken. No missing nuts, bolts, or keys, and all ball joints are properly lubricated. Now we're going to also inspect the outside where I didn't see before for the mirror, and we'll make sure there's no missing nuts or bolts. Next, we're going to come to my battery box and steps. Steps are securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts, bolts, or screws. They're not bent, cracked, or broken, and there's no debris. The battery box itself is securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. It is shut, the lid is shut and secured by these two clamps on either end. Next, we're going to come to our door. We're going to make sure it opens and closes securely. There's also a properly charged and rated fire extinguisher, and the pin is in it, and it's securely mounted to the vehicle. The rest of our safety equipment is behind this door. I have 3 red reflective triangles in a box and spare fuses for the truck. We're going to make sure that our fuel tank is securely mounted to the vehicle. It is not shifted, it is not dented, cracked, or leaking. The cap is secure and in place. We're going to check our crossover lines to make sure they are securely mounted to the vehicle. They are not cut, worn, frayed, rubbing, or leaking any fluids. We're going to come back and I'm going to check my drain valve for my air tanks. It's operating properly. We're going to talk about my frame and cross members. We're going to make sure that the frame is not bent, cracked, twisted, or missing any nuts or bolts. We're also going to check the cross member to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts, and it is not bent, cracked, or twisted. We're going to check our muffler to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. It is not dented, cracked, or broken, and there's no holes. If there were a leak, there would be a soot trail. We're going to check our drive line to make sure that it is securely mounted to the vehicle at both ends. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. The universal joint is free of debris, and it is properly lubricated. Now we're going to come to our catwalk or deck and steps. We're going to make sure that they're securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts, bolts, or clamps. There's no debris, and it is not bent, cracked, or broken. Same with the steps. Securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. Now we're going to come to our airlines. We're going to make sure they're securely connected at both ends. They are not rubbing on anything. The airlines cannot be cracked, crimped, spliced, taped, or leaking. We're also going to check the electrical line. We're going to make sure that the electrical line is securely connected at both ends. It cannot be rubbing, and it cannot be pinched, spliced, taped, and there can be no bare, broken, or exposed wires. Now we're going to take a look between our duals, since I'm standing right here. We're going to make sure that there's no debris between the duals, and we're going to make sure that the duals are not rubbing, which would indicate a flat. Now we're going to check our bulkhead to make sure that there is no bulging, which would indicate a shift in load. We're going to check to make sure that there's no missing rivets, bolts, or screws, and there's no holes in it. Now we're going to come over here to our fifth wheel. We're going to make sure that there's no gap between the upper and lower fifth wheel. It's properly greased. We're going to make sure that the release lever is in the locked and latched position, and the safety latch is over it. We're also going to make sure that this sliding fifth wheel, the pins are in place. They are not cracked, bent, or broken. And we're also going to make sure that we do not have an air leak. We're going to listen for an air leak. We're going to check the fifth wheel mounting bracket to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts, and it is not cracked, twisted, and there's no illegal welds. Now we're going to check our airbag to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. There's no missing nuts or bolts. It is not rubbing, it is not cut, and it is not leaking. Now we're going to go to the spring hanger. We're going to make sure that it's securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. It is not cracked, dented, or broken. We're going to come to our bushing. We're going to make sure it's securely mounted to the vehicle. No missing nuts or bolts. And it is not frayed, worn, or missing. We're also going to check the springs to make sure there are no broken, missing, shifted, or cracked leaf springs. Now we're going to strike these tires to make sure that they're properly inflated. We want to look for even tread wear. Make sure we have at least 2/32 of tread in every major groove. We're going to check the sidewalls. We're going to make sure there's no abrasion, bumps, or cuts, and no exposed cord. Now we're going to check our flange and rim. These rims are different than the front. They have a factory weld in them. We want to make sure there's no illegal welds, no dents or cracks in the flange, and we want to make sure that this factory weld is not cracked and leaking. Behind this beauty cap, there is an axle seal. We want to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or leaking. It's securely mounted to the vehicle, and it's not missing any nuts or bolts. If I wanted to check the oil level in this, I would check it in the differential housing. Now we're going to come around. We're going to take my make-believe flashlight. We're going to look up here and make sure that the jaws are fully secured around the shank of the kingpin, not the head. Then we're going to take a look at this torque arm under here. Securely mounted to the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. The bushings are in place, and they're not missing any nuts or bolts, and they're not frayed, worn, or missing. Now we're going to go to the floorboards of the trailer. We're looking for broken, loose, or missing floorboards and no holes in the floorboards. Now we're going to talk about the cross members in the frame. The frame cannot be bent, twisted, cracked, no illegal welds, no missing nuts or bolts. The same with the cross members. They cannot be twisted, bent, cracked, and no missing nuts or bolts. We're going to check our mud flaps to make sure that they are securely mounted the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. The mud flaps themselves cannot be worn or torn, and they must hang down past the center of the axle. We're also going to make sure there's enough clearance when the truck turns that the mud flap brackets will not interfere with the landing gear. Now we're going to talk about the landing gear. First, we're going to take note that they are fully raised, there's freedom of movement, and no debris. We're going to take note that the handle is secure in place. Now we're going to look at our support frame. We're going to make sure it's not dented, cracked, or broken. It's securely mounted the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. As we walk down the side of the trailer, we're going to take note that our stickers are not peeling or frayed or faded. We're going to look for holes in the side of the trailer. Underneath here we have a radius arm. We're going to make sure the radius arm is not bent, cracked, or broken. Securely mounted the vehicle, no missing nuts or bolts. And the bushings are in place and they're not frayed, worn, or missing. We also have spring brakes back here. We want to make sure that spring brake cans are not dented, cracked, or leaking. And the slack adjusters, the same as the front. If I pull on them, I will have no more than 1 inch of free play, and when they're applied, it will be at 90 degrees or less. This particular unit has a sliding tandem. We want to make sure that tandem pins are fully engaged and locked, and the handle is in the locked and secure position. We want to strike these tires, make sure that they're full of air. We want to make note that there is an oil hub on the rear. We want to make sure it's not dented, cracked, or broken. No missing nuts or bolts. It is not leaking around the bolts or the seal. And we can pop this rubber grommet out to check level. We're also going to check the rim. Same way we did up there. Check the flange for dents or cracks. Check for illegal welds. We're going to check this factory weld for leaking or cracks. We also want to make note that the valve stem is in place, it's not damaged or leaking, and the cap is in place. We're going to look at our doors. First, we're looking for holes in the doors. We want to make sure that the doors are closed securely. We want to make sure that the hinges are not cracked, broken, or missing. There are no missing nuts or bolts.